The steamer Eastland rolled onto its side while still tied to its dock. She had been warned unstable for years, and after the Titanic, a new safety law required more lifeboats on her upper decks. It pushed an already top-heavy ship closer to disaster. On July 24, 1915, 844 people died in 20 feet of calm Chicago River water, many trapped inside only feet from the street. They were Western Electric workers and their families, dressed for a summer company picnic. The disaster happened before the ship ever left the dock. The Eastland was launched in 1903, built for speed on Lake Michigan, long and narrow, with a shallow draft. Those same qualities, combined with a tall superstructure, made her hard to keep upright. Among sailors on the Great Lakes, she earned a nickname: a crank, tender, and top-heavy, quick to lean and slow to recover. She gave her first warning early. On the 17th of July, 1904, almost 11 years to the day before the disaster, the Eastland listed so severely while loading that water came over one of her gangways and passengers scrambled back onto the dock in a panic. The incident was smoothed over. She did it again in 1906, with more than 2,000 aboard. The problem was not simply that one ship was flawed. It was that no one whose job it was to certify her had the means to measure the danger. The Federal Steamboat Inspection Service checked boilers and hulls and counted life preservers, but it did not calculate a ship's metacentric height, the measure of how strongly a vessel resists rolling over. After the disaster, one analysis of the wreckage put the Eastland's metacentric height that morning at around 4 inches, a figure that should have emptied the ship. That number was calculated afterward, from the ruins, not measured on the morning it mattered. So the Eastland went into the summer of 1915 exactly as before. Fast, profitable, popular, and known to be a vessel that did not like to sit still with a full load. Without a change to her hull, she was made more dangerous still by a law. 3 years earlier, another ship had changed the world. When the Titanic sank in 1912, the detail that horrified the public most was the arithmetic of the lifeboats. More than 2,000 people aboard, with places for barely half. The lesson seemed obvious. Every ship must carry enough lifeboats for all. That lesson became American law in March of 1915. The Seamen's Act, championed by Senator Robert La Follette, was a landmark of reform, and much of it saved lives. But one provision required passenger vessels to carry lifeboats and rafts for a far larger share of the people they held, for ocean liners riding low in deep water. This was sensible. For a top-heavy lake steamer, it was not. To comply, her owners added boats and rafts high on the upper decks, the worst possible place to add weight to a ship already too tall for her width. Tons of new equipment were mounted above the center of gravity, no stability test was performed, and the ship was sent back to work. The danger was not discovered afterward. It was spoken aloud in advance to the government itself. As the Seamen's Act was debated, the shipping executive A.A. Shantz of the Detroit and Cleveland Navigation Company testified before Congress that some lakes vessels were so tender that piling the required boats onto their upper decks would capsize them. His warning was entered into a congressional resolution. Such ships would turn turtle if forced to carry all that weight up high. The warning was heard, written down, and set aside. No one with the authority to act connected the rule to the ship. The Eastland went into her final season carrying, bolted to her highest deck, the safety equipment that would help kill the people it was meant to save. Return now to the morning of the 24th of July, 1915. The Eastland began to list almost as soon as passengers came aboard. This was not at first alarming. She was a tender ship, and her crew knew it. They worked the ballast tanks to hold her level. But there were more people than the tanks could handle. By 7:15, She leaned toward the wharf and was corrected. Then she began to lean the other way, toward the open river, and this time she did not come back. As she tilted, passengers on the upper decks slid gently downhill. Water came in through the gangway doors and portholes. The more she leaned, the more water she took. Witnesses described it as strangely slow and almost silent. No collision, no storm, no explosion, only a great ship tied to a wharf in a calm river, tipping over as if she were tired. At about 7:30, the Eastland rolled completely onto her side and settled into the river mud in around 20 feet of water. For those on the upper side, the fall was survivable. Many climbed onto the exposed hull. But for the hundreds below deck, the ship became a trap. Families were pinned in flooded cabins. The heavy summer clothing of the era dragged people down. Most of the dead never left the ship. They drowned inside her in 20 feet of water, a stone's throw from the street. A welder cut holes in the hull to reach those trapped inside. One diver recovered so many small bodies that he had to be pulled from the water himself. More than 800 people were dead. The most widely cited figure is 844, though the exact number was disputed even then. Among them were 22 entire families, erased in a single morning. The dead were laid out in rows in a nearby armory, and the city filed past. The city demanded answers, and the search for blame began before the bodies were recovered. Grand juries convened. Indictments came down against the captain, the chief engineer, and officers of the company that owned and inspected the vessel. Charges of manslaughter and criminal carelessness. For a time, it seemed someone would answer for 800 deaths. No one did. The criminal cases dragged through the courts and collapsed. A federal judge ruled that the fault lay with the design and certification of the ship, not with the crew who had sailed her as instructed. Every defendant was acquitted. The families fared no better in the civil courts. Under the maritime law of the day, a ship owner's liability could be limited to the value of the wreck. The Eastland, raised and stripped down, was worth a sum, swallowed entirely by salvage costs and creditors' claims. The families received essentially nothing. So consider what the record now held. A ship known to be unstable for 11 years. A public near capsizing in 1904, and another in 1906. An inspection system that certified vessels it could not measure. A safety law that added deadly weight to the highest deck of a top-heavy ship. A steamship official who warned Congress, in advance, that ships like this would turn over. And at the end of it, 844 dead. No one convicted, no one compensated. Every warning had been given, and every one had been survived, smoothed over, or filed away. The bill came due on one Saturday morning, in 20 feet of water, before the ship left the dock. The Eastland disaster did not produce a single famous law. There is no Eastland Act in the statute books. What it produced was quieter and more important. It forced the people who certified ships to learn how to measure the thing that had killed her. The lesson was stability itself. The government had been licensing passenger vessels without any reliable way to answer the most basic question. Will this ship, loaded with people, stay upright? In the years after 1915, that began to change. Inclining tests moved from an engineering nicety toward a routine requirement, and passenger capacity certification came under harder scrutiny, tied to the physics of the hull rather than a number on a form. Follow that thread forward, and it leads to the present day. Every commercial passenger vessel built under the American flag now has its plans reviewed for stability before it may carry a single passenger, its balance calculated, its tendency to roll measured on paper long before anyone steps aboard. That office descends in a direct line from the reforms that followed the Eastland. The question no inspector could answer on the morning of the disaster must now be answered in writing before anyone boards. The Eastland herself did not vanish. Raised from the river, she was sold to the Navy, rebuilt as a gunboat, and renamed the Wilmette, the ship that could not be trusted to sit at a dock, serving her second life as a stable naval vessel scrapped after the Second World War. 844 people, by most counts, died at a wharf in the heart of a great city, killed by a danger named aloud in the halls of Congress before it ever came for them. The requirement that a passenger ship prove it will stay upright exists because of what happened here. The safety rules are written in blood, and it is usually blood that somebody was warned about first.